Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're tackling something that I think secretly bugs all of us.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
You ever get that feeling that, companies are making our stuff break or go out of style way too quickly?
All the time.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to the bottom of it today in our deep dive. We've got a whole stack of sources here. Everything from, a pamphlet from 1932. Can you believe that?
Wow, 1932.
The articles about everything from light bulbs, fashion, software. We're going to figure out how planned obsolescence works, what's the deal, how it affects the economy, the environment, and if there's any way to, escape this constant need to upgrade.
I think that's a great mission. And it is interesting that we have a source from 1932 that was, the Depression.
Right.
It's amazing this concept has been around for so long. In fact, this pamphlet we have, it actually proposed planned obsolescence as a way to, kickstart the economy back then.
So they're saying, make stuff break faster so people buy more?
Yeah. It's a really, different way of looking at things.
I guess at the time, maybe it made sense to them.
Maybe.
But okay, let's back up for a second. Before we go too far, let's just start with the basics. What exactly is planned obsolescence?
Okay, so in a nutshell, planned obsolescence is when companies design products to have a limited lifespan. The goal here is to make sure people have to buy replacements, which of course boosts sales. It's kind of like, that hidden expiration date on your gadgets that you don't really know about.
So basically, they know our phone's going to crap out in 2 years, but they don't tell us that.
Yeah, exactly. There's this big information gap between the people who make the product and the people who buy it, They know how long it's going to last, and we don't.
Sneaky.
Yeah. And this whole thing really works best in markets where there are just a few big companies. We call them oligopolies. That's when it's easier to sort of control how long products last and, make the rules of the game.
So fewer companies, less competition means our stuff breaks faster. That's kind of messed up.
It's something to think about. And, this whole idea of the government mandating obsolescence, that actually came from Bernard London, the guy who wrote that 1932 pamphlet.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He thought the government should actually force people to replace things regularly. Imagine if your fridge had an official expiration date.
Okay. That's a little too big brother for me.
That's a pretty wild concept.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on one hand, it'd be kind of annoying to always have to buy new stuff. But then again, maybe it would, push companies to innovate more,
Yeah.
Always coming up with the next best thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off.
It's interesting to think about.
But, fast forward a few decades later, and we get Brooks Stevens in 1954. He was an industrial designer, and he actually popularized this term, planned obsolescence. But he framed it a little bit differently. He was talking more about getting people to want the newer thing, even if what they have is still working fine.
Oh, so tapping into that psychology of always wanting to upgrade, even if you don't need to. I think we've all fallen for that at some point, right? That new phone feeling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's exciting.
But it's funny you should say that because just a few years after that, Volkswagen, they had this ad campaign where they were basically making fun of planned obsolescence. They were like, hey, our cars last forever, which was a total dig at their competitors.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Seems like there's always been this back and forth between making things that last and making things that make us crave the newest version.
Mm-hmm.
So how do companies actually do this? What are their tactics to make planned obsolescence happen?
Well, there are a few different ways they go about it. One of the most basic ones is just using, cheap materials or designs that aren't meant to last.
Oh, yeah.
Like that flimsy little plastic latch that always breaks on lunchboxes.
Ugh, I hate that.
Yeah.
It happens every time.
Exactly.
Any big examples of this happening?
Oh, yeah. You've probably heard of the Phoebus cartel. This was back in the 1920s. They basically controlled the entire market for light bulbs. And guess what they did?
What?
They got together and decided to make light bulbs that only lasted for 1,000 hours.
No way. A light bulb conspiracy?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm already starting to get a little paranoid about everything I own.
It's a lot to think about.
Okay, so besides making things break faster, what else did they do? I'm scared to know the answer.
Well, sometimes it's not even about making things break faster.
Right.
It's more like making them really hard or even impossible to fix.
Oh, yeah.
It's called prevention of repairs. Think about all those gadgets, like sealed up tight. You can't even open them up without special tools.
Yeah, like those tiny little screwdrivers you can never find.
Right. Or like when the replacement part is so expensive.
Ugh. It's almost like they're saying, just buy a new one.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
It is. We even came across a source talking about how Toshiba tried to stop people from, sharing repair manuals online.
Seriously.
Yeah. Like they don't want us fixing things ourselves.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, well, let's move on to something a little less sinister.
Okay.
Let's talk about style obsolescence. This one is a bit more fun, I think.
Ah, yes. Style obsolescence.
I'm looking at you, fast fashion industry.
The idea that last season's clothes are suddenly, unacceptable, even though they're perfectly fine.
Right.
The fashion industry, they're masters of this. Always got to have the latest trends.
But it's not just clothes, right?
No, not at all. Think about something like Sneakers.
Okay, yeah.
The same shoe, basically, but then they just change the color a little bit.
Or add a stripe or something.
Exactly. And suddenly you got to have the new version.
It's crazy how easily we fall for it.
It's true. But then you've also got what we call systemic obsolescence.
Systemic, what's that?
So that's when a product becomes obsolete because, the whole system, it works with changes.
Okay.
A big example is technology.
Uh-huh.
Like software updates that make older versions, stop working.
Yeah. Yes.
Or how about those charging ports? They're always changing.
I know. I have a drawer full of old cables that are useless now.
Right. It forces you to upgrade, even if you don't want to.
Okay, so that's systemic obsolescence.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Well, then there's the most blatant tactic, I think.
Lay it on me.
Programmed obsolescence.
Okay, what's that?
This is where they literally use software or chips to make a product stop working
What?
after a certain amount of time or use.
But even if it's still in perfect condition,
Exactly.
that's messed up.
It is. It's like a self-destruct button built right in.
Like those printers that stop working even though the ink cartridge is still full.
Yep. Classic example.
I always thought there was something fishy about that.
Well, now you know.
Wow. Is this even legal?
It's a good question. It definitely feels like a gray area.
Maybe that's a whole other deep dive for another time.
Yeah, we could do that.
But okay, let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
What does all of this mean for the economy and for, the environment?
Well, on the surface, planned obsolescence can seem good for the economy.
How so?
It creates demand, keeps those factories humming,
Okay.
more jobs.
Makes sense.
But some experts, they say that this kind of short-term thinking, this constant need for more,
Yeah.
it's got a downside.
Like what?
Well, it can lead to what we call a throwaway culture.
Where we just toss stuff out instead of fixing it.
Exactly. And then there's the environmental cost.
Oh, right.
Think about all the resources that go into making new products.
Yeah.
Pollution, the
Yeah.
waste.
It's not exactly sustainable, is it?
Not really. One of our sources actually talks about this.
Okay.
They say that by 2017, the amount of electronic waste globally, it was projected to reach over 65 million metric tons.
That's insane.
It's a lot of old phones and computers ending up in landfills.
Okay, so it's bad for the planet. But what about us as consumers? Does this constant cycle of obsolescence affect us in other ways?
Oh, definitely.
How so?
Well, we get stuck in this loop of consumerism.
Yeah.
Always buying new stuff, even if we don't really need it.
Okay.
There's this thing called perceived obsolescence.
Perceived obsolescence.
Yeah, it's like companies convince us that our stuff is outdated, even if it still works fine.
Oh, I totally know what you mean.
Right.
It's like as soon as the new iPhone comes out, suddenly my old one feels slow and clunky.
Exactly. That's exactly what they want you to think.
I'm being manipulated.
A little bit. Marketing is very good at making us feel like we're missing out.
Yeah, and then there's social media.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Always showing us the newest, coolest gadgets.
It's a powerful combination.
So we've got companies making stuff that breaks and marketing making us feel bad if we don't upgrade.
Pretty much.
It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. But thankfully, there are some alternatives starting to pop up.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
One of the most promising ideas is this concept of a circular economy.
Okay, I've heard that term before.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea.
But what does it actually mean?
So basically, it's about designing products with durability in mind.
Okay.
And making sure they can be repaired and reused.
So instead of throwing stuff away, we keep using it.
Exactly. The goal is to minimize waste and keep materials in use for as long as possible.
That sounds amazing, but is it realistic?
Well, it would take a big shift in how we think about things, both as companies and as consumers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But there are some companies out there, they're starting to experiment with things like permanent guarantees.
Permanent guarantees?
Yeah, like the product is guaranteed to last forever.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It is. And it makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
If a company knows they're responsible for a product for its entire lifespan,
Yeah,
they're going to make sure it's built to last.
makes sense.
But it probably takes a lot of, consumer pressure to make this happen.
Right. Like we have to demand better from companies.
Exactly. That's where consumer activism comes in.
So what can we do as individuals to make a difference?
Well, for starters, be a conscious consumer.
Okay.
Do your research before you buy something.
All right.
Look for products that are built to last, that can be repaired.
Advice.
Support companies that are, committed to sustainability.
Use our buying power to make a statement.
Exactly. It's about sending a message.
Okay, but sometimes it feels like we're just one tiny voice.
I know what you mean.
How do we make sure those voices are heard?
Well, there's strength in numbers, right?
Yeah.
Support organizations that are fighting for right to repair.
Okay.
Advocate for policies that make it easier to fix our stuff.
Right.
And don't underestimate the power of conversation.
Oh, yeah. Just talking about these issues can make a difference.
Absolutely. Spread the word.
Okay, so it's about shifting the culture.
Yeah. Moving away from this constant need for the newest, shiniest thing.
Be more mindful about what we buy.
Exactly.
And sometimes, maybe the best choice is just to buy less stuff.
That's a really important point.
Do we really need another gadget?
Right. Do we really need that upgrade?
It's a good question to ask ourselves more often.
It is. It's about recognizing that our choices have consequences.
For our wallets and for the planet.
Exactly.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Going back to that 1932 pamphlet,
Okay.
they were proposing planned obsolescence as a way to boost the economy, right?
Right.
But it makes you wonder, are there ever times when, a little bit of obsolescence might actually be a good thing?
That's a really interesting point because, if things never became obsolete,
Right.
would we ever have, the drive to invent new things?
Exactly.
Think about how far technology has come.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want to destroy the planet in the process,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely not. It's all about finding that balance, that sweet spot.
Between progress and sustainability.
Mm.
Easier said than done, I guess.
It is. It is. But I think, the real key is changing our mindset,
Okay.
We've got to move away from this idea of just, using something and then tossing it out.
Yeah.
It's got to be more about, a circle, right?
It's a circular economy.
Exactly. Things get made to last. They can be repaired, reused.
So less stuff ending up in landfills.
Right. But, how do we actually get there?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It takes effort from, everyone.
Companies, consumers.
Everyone. But there are things we can do, as individuals.
Okay, like what?
Well, just being more aware,
Aware of.
of what you're buying.
Okay.
Don't just, buy the first thing you see. Do some research.
Yeah.
Look for products that are built to last, that you can fix if they break.
Support companies that are, trying to do things the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Vote with your wallet, they say.
But, does it really make a difference if just one person does that?
It's a start, right.
Yeah.
And then, there's also power in collective action.
What do you mean?
Get involved with organizations that are pushing for right to repair.
Okay.
Support policies that make it easier to fix our stuff.
And
Talk to people about it.
Yeah, word of mouth is powerful.
It really is. The more people who are aware of this, the better.
So it's about shifting the culture, really. Making it less about, always having the newest thing and more about being mindful of what we consume.
Exactly.
And sometimes, honestly, the best thing to do is just, not buy anything at all.
Right.
Do we really need that new gadget,
That's a good question to ask.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. From the history of planned obsolescence to the impact it has on all of us to the different ways we can push back against it.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation.
I hope it's made everyone a little bit more aware.
And empowered.
Yeah, we don't have to just accept this system, right?
Absolutely not. We have choices.
So to all our deep divers out there, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into planned obsolescence. We hope you learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to make some changes.
And keep those questions coming. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, happy diving.